Nice to meet you.
I'm Shorty. Nice to meet you. All right. Start off by asking you, what were you doing before you entered the service?
I finished college, finished Hope College down there. And then at that time there was a draft. And I thought, well, if I get drafted, I'll be in the infantry and that'll be fine. So I enlisted in the Air Force.
The Air Force? All right. All right. Well, what was your main job you were supposed to do while you were in the Air Force?
The main, after 3 years as a navigator, I went to pilot training, and from that time on I was a fighter pilot. And part of the time was as an instructor fighter pilot.
Okay.
That was the main career.
Did you like to do that? Teaching others?
It was challenging. The flying them to begin with was very challenging. There's a lot of things you have to be constantly.
Right.
And teaching others was the same way, that you had to come up with things that they understood and work to new things like that.
All right.
I had a few questions for you. When and where were you born?
I was born in Muskegon in 1931.
Did you enlist or were you drafted?
I enlisted. There was an aviation cadet program.
Okay. How did you adapt to military life, including the physical regimen, barracks food, and social life?
It was a bit of a challenge for you go and they're telling you what to do. Matter of fact, in the aviation cadets, they start you off with a period of time where they overemphasize these things. Like when you're eating food, you'd have to hit the fork and you bring it up like this and bring it to your mouth and do that. Just to make sure that you would respond to discipline. But after that, I don't think there's any real problems. It wasn't a great social life, and mainly on base during the training portion of it.
Right. If you were on the front lines, what combat action did you witness?
Okay, first portion, I went over to Vietnam with a 1st Cavalry Division, and while they were setting up their operation, I went over to Thailand and I flew F-4 day missions in the Phantom. We were doing escort and we were doing daylight bombing of bridges and such. And later, I went back with the 1st Cavalry Division, and on the first operation, we ended up just outside the Idrang Valley, where they'd had the first major engagement between the Americans and the North Vietnamese troops. And what we did is we marched from where we were into the valley, relieved the other group, which went home, and then we were marching to another landing zone, and while we were en route there, we were ambushed by the enemy troops. We thought they'd all gone home, they hadn't. And so we had a big battle there overnight, and that was the biggest Army battle I was involved in there. That was an overnight thing there. And then we spent a couple more days finishing that operation. Later on, we went back to the base camp, and then we would go out, make helicopter assault landings in nearby areas, spend maybe 2 days, come back to the base area, then go off to another area. And there was another battle that the 1st Cavalry Division got involved in the area called Ban San, towards a coastal area. And I was involved in the first part of that. That was the last of the Army. And then the combat other than that was going back to Thailand and flying night missions for about 4 months in the F-4. Okay.
All right. While you were serving in the Air Force, have you learned any life lessons?
I think the discipline that it takes to be successful was a life lesson. the fact that you have to work together. That we talk about the Air Force family, and it's not just you and the other units around you, but it's actually your families are involved in this being successful. If you went overseas, you'd have a host family, somebody else in your squadron that would help get you settled, help get the family settled. And so having that family concept was a big part of it.
I think that's just about all the questions I have.
How did your wartime experiences affect your life personally?
I think mainly it's an appreciation for what we have right now is based on what people have done for us before. And that's why it's kind of neat you got this program going of interviewing people. But right now I've been quite involved with the Veterans of Foreign War. One thing we do are military rites at funerals for veterans, because that's their family can recognize that veteran, what they did. Involved quite a bit with the Memorial Day programs, where we organize a parade downtown and trying to get people out there and get them inspired to the fact that what we have is the result of the sacrifice of a lot of people. Veterans are the same way. So anyway, I get involved in those things because I see a need for us to get the word out that we've got a lot to appreciate in this country. We've got a real lot.
How did you readjust to civilian life after the war?
It was relatively easy for me. We spent 6 months right by the base where I'd been, substitute teaching, by the way, and then came back to Muskegon and did different jobs. I did like postal work and whatnot. I think it was a relatively easy adjustment.
Right. One last question. Is there anything that we didn't ask you in this interview that you would like to personally put?
No, I think you've covered things pretty well. What motivates you to, while you're in the service, what motivates you right now?
Right.
That was good. That's good questions. I also really think you've done a great job of whoever made up all these.
Right.
answers.
Me and Shorty actually did the one in Vietnam.
Okay, that's a good.
You want the American flag?
There you go.
Yep, that's us.
Me, him, and Robert actually.
Okay,
Yeah, we all three did that one.
good. Yeah, are you going to use these elsewhere? Gonna take them?
And they're probably just gonna stay here.
Okay.
Yep.
They were super. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time, sir.
Sure.
Appreciate that.
Thank you for your time and your service.
Yeah, and your service too.